The twins screamed, not out of pain, but out of frustration. Their tiny hands slammed against the wooden floor as toys scattered around them. The boy's face was red from trying to stand, his sister's cheeks wet from tears. They were 6 years old and still couldn't walk, still couldn't speak. In the middle of the mansion's golden-lit nursery, Amara, the new nanny, stood silently, watching. Her skin gleamed like rich bronze under the sunlight pouring through the glass walls, her dark curls tied back neatly, her eyes calm, deep, almost knowing. She didn't rush to comfort them, didn't shout, didn't panic like the nurses before her. She just watched. One step back, hands clasped, as if she could hear something no one else could. From the doorway, Ethan Royce, billionaire and father of the twins, stood stiff and impatient. He'd hired therapists, neurologists, speech pathologists. All had failed. His children had been declared developmentally frozen. But this woman, this soft-spoken nanny from Atlanta, had looked him straight in the eye during her interview and said quietly, "They don't need medicine. They need connection." Now, as his son let out another angry cry, Amara knelt slowly, took the boy's trembling hand, and began to hum. It wasn't a lullaby. It was something older, deeper. Her voice filled the room, low, warm, rhythmic, and for a moment, the children stopped crying. Their breathing steadied. The boy blinked, as if recognizing a sound he'd heard long before he was born. Ethan's mouth parted, confused. The air shifted. Something unseen rippled through that golden room. And then, the girl, the one who had never spoken a word in her life, looked straight at Amara and whispered, barely audible, "Mama!" Ethan froze. His world stopped moving. The Royce mansion sat high above the California cliffs, all glass and marble, the kind of house that looked like it had been built to impress the sky itself. Yet, inside that brilliance, the sound that most often echoed wasn't laughter. It was silence. A silence so heavy, it seemed to fill every golden hallway, every perfect corner of Ethan Royce's world. Ethan wasn't just any man. He was a billionaire tech visionary, the kind people wrote magazine covers about, the kind who turned his genius into empires. But behind every camera flash and handshake was a truth no one saw. His 6-year-old twins, Leo and Lila, couldn't walk and couldn't speak. Doctors had filled his home for years. Words like neurological delay, nonverbal disorder, muscle dysfunction had been thrown around like confetti. Expensive, cold confetti that never fixed a thing. Specialists flew in from Zurich, Tokyo, Boston. All of them left with polite apologies and big invoices. Ethan paid them all. But each time the door closed behind a new expert, the silence in the mansion grew louder. The twins' mother, Sophie, had passed away during their birth. A tragedy that left Ethan half alive himself. He buried his grief in work, hiding behind meetings, contracts, and private jets. Love had become a distant memory. Parenting, a science experiment. Every nanny before Amara had lasted less than a month. The twins didn't respond to anyone. They didn't look up, didn't smile, didn't make a sound. One nanny quit after claiming she heard Leo scream without moving his mouth. Another said she felt the house push her out. Ethan had dismissed them all. Superstition wasn't in his vocabulary, but when Amara arrived, something about her presence unsettled the mansion. She was quiet, almost too quiet, with a gaze that seemed to see past the surface of things. When she first stepped into the nursery, she didn't ask questions or check charts. Instead, she walked to the children, knelt beside them and whispered, "You've been waiting long enough, haven't you?" Ethan had overheard her. He almost fired her right there. But something, curiosity, maybe exhaustion, made him stop. He'd already tried everything the world could offer. Maybe he could afford one more mistake. Within days, Amara changed everything. She rearranged the twins' room, removing the toys that beeped and flashed, and replacing them with soft drums, textured fabrics, and hanging chimes that caught the light. The other staff whispered that she was strange, that she prayed under her breath when she thought no one was listening. But the children began to notice. Their eyes started following her. When she entered the room, their shoulders relaxed. When she spoke, their breathing synced with her words. Ethan watched from a distance, equal parts fascinated and afraid. He didn't believe in magic. He believed in data. Yet here was this woman, doing something science couldn't explain. One night, he passed by the nursery and saw Amara sitting cross-legged on the floor. The twins were beside her, both awake, both calm. She was humming, the same haunting tune he'd heard once before. And though he didn't understand the words, he felt something stir in him for the first time in years. A feeling he'd buried long ago. Hope. The morning light poured through the nursery windows like liquid gold, spilling over the soft rugs and pale blue walls. Amara stood by the window, humming softly, the same low melody that had somehow calmed the twins days before. Her hands moved slowly, gracefully, as if conducting an invisible rhythm. Leo sat on the floor beside her, clutching a small wooden drum Amara had brought from her hometown in Georgia. Lila, his twin sister, stared at the hanging chimes that shimmered near the window. Her eyes, once blank and distant, now reflected light, curiosity, life. Ethan stood outside the half-open door, coffee cup in hand, pretending to check emails. But his eyes didn't leave the scene. Every move Amara made drew him in. Every sound she made seemed to fill the empty space he'd carried inside him for years. "Come on, Leo," she whispered softly, kneeling beside the boy. "You can do it, sweetheart." Her tone wasn't commanding. It was encouraging, alive. She guided his tiny hands toward the drum, tapping once, twice, then pausing. Leo stared at her fingers, then at the drum, then, hesitantly, mimicked her motion. The first sound that came out was faint, uncertain, but it was something. Amara smiled like it was a miracle. "That's it," she said gently. Again, Ethan's throat tightened. For the first time in 6 years, he heard his son respond to someone. Not just with his eyes, but with intention. The staff whispered about it all afternoon. The new nanny had made the silent twins move. The chef peeked in to see for himself. The housekeeper cried quietly, saying she hadn't seen light in those children's eyes since their mother died. But that night, something else happened. Something that made the whispers turn into wonder. Around 2 a.m., Ethan woke to faint sounds coming from the nursery monitor. At first, he thought it was static. Then he heard a soft rhythm, tapping. Curious, he got out of bed and followed the sound down the hall. When he opened the nursery door, the sight stopped him cold. Amara sat cross-legged on the floor again, her eyes half closed, humming that same haunting tune, low and ancient. A melody that didn't belong to any lullaby Ethan knew. The twins were awake, sitting before her, their tiny palms resting on her knees. Their eyes were closed, their breathing in sync with hers. He didn't interrupt, couldn't. The air in the room felt charged, alive, like the calm before a summer storm. And then slowly, Amara whispered, "Say it with me. Breathe in. Breathe out. You're safe now." Lila's lips trembled. A faint sound, a hum, almost like an echo, escaped her throat. Then Leo followed. Ethan pressed a hand to his chest, unable to move. His children were responding, not to therapy, not to machines, but to her. Over the next few weeks, the impossible began to unfold. Leo started crawling toward the sunlight every morning, laughing, actually laughing. When Amara clapped her hands, Lila began to hum the tune back to her nanny, every note fragile but growing stronger. The mansion that had once been a museum of silence now pulsed with warmth. The staff's whispers turned into awe. Some said Amara was an angel. Others claimed she used hypnosis or sound therapy. Ethan didn't care what they called it. For the first time in 6 years, he felt his home alive. But as the days passed, something began to trouble him. One evening, he walked into the nursery to find Amara sitting alone, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes were wet. "You okay?" he asked softly. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir," she said quickly, wiping her face. "Just tired." But her voice carried something deeper. Sorrow. Maybe guilt. Ethan knelt beside her. "You've done more for them in weeks than doctors did in years. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Amara smiled faintly, but her gaze drifted toward the twins, now asleep, curled up beside each other. "It's not me doing it," she whispered. "It's them. They're remembering." "Remembering what?" She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Her." Ethan froze. "Their mother?" Amara nodded slowly. "They feel her. Through music, through warmth, through memory. They never lost her. They just didn't know how to reach her." He didn't know what to say. He wanted to believe she was speaking metaphorically, that grief and healing could somehow be connected. But something in her eyes told him it wasn't just metaphor. It was something else. Something deeper, older, spiritual. That night, Ethan dreamt of Sophie, her laughter, her song. When he woke, he found the same tune echoing faintly through the halls, as if the house itself was humming. Weeks passed. The twins began walking, unsteady, clumsy, but walking. Their first steps weren't recorded by a camera crew or celebrated with balloons. They happened quietly, in the golden light of dawn, as Amara guided them across the room, one trembling step at a time. When Ethan walked in and saw it, he stopped breathing. His children, his silent, still children, were moving. Lila turned, her tiny arms outstretched toward her father. Ethan dropped to his knees, tears spilling freely as she stumbled into his embrace. Leo followed, falling against his chest, giggling for the first time in his life. Amara stood by the door, silent, watching, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes glistening. Ethan looked up at her, unable to speak. She smiled softly and said, "You see? They just needed to be heard." The housekeeper found him hours later, sitting on the nursery floor, holding both his children, still crying. But even as joy filled that mansion, there was something else beneath the surface. Something unspoken. Amara's health began to wane. Her color faded. Her hands trembled more often, and dark circles formed beneath her eyes. She brushed off the staff's concern, insisting she was fine. But one night, as the twins slept peacefully, she walked to the nursery window and whispered into the dark, "They're ready now." A tear rolled down her cheek. The next morning, she didn't come down for breakfast. The staff searched her room and found only a note resting on her pillow. "They're whole now. That's all I came for." Ethan found himself staring out the same window she had stood beside, the twins asleep in his arms. He didn't understand everything Amara had done, or who she truly was. But he didn't need to, because when Lila woke and looked up at him, she spoke a single word, clear, bright, and full of life. "Daddy." Ethan broke down, holding them tighter than ever before. And outside, through the soft morning mist, the faint sound of humming drifted across the cliffs. Amara's song, carried by the wind, like a goodbye that never really ended. The storm rolled in without warning that night. A heavy, gray silence before thunder cracked over the cliffs. The wind howled through the tall windows of the Royce mansion, rattling the chandeliers and sending streaks of lightning across the nursery walls. Ethan stood by the window, his heart racing. The twins had woken up screaming, not the cries of fear, but something else, something deeper, as if they were being torn from a dream. He rushed to their room, finding them sitting upright in their beds, both trembling, both whispering a single word over and over again. Amara. Amara. His pulse spiked. It had been a week since she disappeared, a week since she left only that single note. They're whole now. That's all I came for. He'd searched for her, called the agency, even hired investigators. Nothing. No records. No history. As if she had never existed. Now, in the flickering light, the twins' voices rose again. Amara. Shh, Ethan said, kneeling between them. She's gone, babies. She's... But before he could finish, the wind roared louder, blowing open the nursery window. The curtains flew like wild wings, and the soft chime Amara had hung weeks ago began to sing. That same low, haunting melody. Ethan froze. It was her song. The twins stopped crying instantly. Their eyes, those same gray-blue eyes that had once been so empty, now glowed with something warm, something alive. Leo pointed toward the window, his tiny finger trembling. She's here. Ethan turned sharply, but all he saw was rain. Yet the air, it was thick, humming, alive. A warmth filled the room. Not heat, but presence. He could feel it, like a heartbeat in the air. The chime's song deepened, and then Lila began to hum. It was perfect. Every note, every rhythm. Exactly like Amara's. Leo joined in, their voices small but sure. And then, through their melody, Ethan heard something. Another voice. Softer, distant, but unmistakable, Amara's. Don't be afraid, Ethan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. His mind told him it couldn't be real, but his heart knew. This was no illusion. The chimes swayed harder as if an invisible hand brushed them. The twins began to rise from their beds, stepping carefully, walking without help, without fear. Their little feet touched the floor like they'd always known how. Ethan's tears blurred his vision. He reached out, falling to his knees. Amara, he whispered. If you can hear me, thank you. The air shimmered near the window, just for a moment. A soft glow, golden and warm, spread across the room, like sunlight trapped in the storm. For a heartbeat, Ethan could swear he saw her. Standing there, calm, smiling, radiant, and behind her, a faint, delicate outline, was Sophie. His wife. Ethan's breath caught. His entire body froze as Sophie's hand touched Amara's shoulder, and the two women smiled. At him, at the twins, at each other. Then, the light dimmed. The wind softened. The chimes slowed their song. The twins turned, their faces glowing with calm. Lila touched his cheek and said, "She said Mommy's proud." Ethan pulled them both into his arms, sobbing. Not from sadness, but from something beyond words. When the storm finally cleared, dawn broke over the cliffs. The mansion, for the first time in 6 years, felt alive. In the days that followed, Leo and Lila began to thrive. Laughing, running, talking. Therapists called it unexplainable progress. The world called it a miracle. Ethan called it something else, grace. One evening, as he tucked them into bed, Lila asked softly, "Daddy, where did Miss Amara go?" Ethan smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She went home, sweetheart. But will she come back?" He looked toward the window, where the chime still hung. Outside, the sea wind carried a faint melody. That same hum, drifting through the night air, gentle and loving. "She never really left," he said quietly. "She's here, in the music, in you." Lila smiled, closing her eyes. Leo whispered, "Good night, Miss Amara." And somewhere beyond the cliffs, carried by the rhythm of the ocean, a soft voice answered, "Good night, my loves." The chimes swayed once more, singing her final lullaby, a song that would echo through that house forever. The years passed softly, like pages turning in a book Ethan never wanted to end. The Royce mansion, once cold and echoing, now breathed with laughter, footsteps, and the everyday chaos of family life. The chimes still hung by the nursery window, swaying gently whenever the wind from the cliffs rolled in, and every time they sang, Leo and Lila looked up, smiling, as if they recognized the voice within their melody. The twins grew stronger. By the time they were 9, they could run through the halls, paint the walls with colors that made the sunlight dance, and tell stories about dreams they barely understood. Lila loved to hum, that same soft old tune Amara once sang, while Leo had begun to play piano, his little fingers echoing the rhythm that once healed him. Every corner of the house carried traces of Amara's touch. The nursery remained unchanged, her hand-woven blanket still folded neatly on the rocking chair, her set of wooden drums resting under the window. Ethan never moved them. He couldn't, because somehow they didn't feel like objects. They felt like her. He had never found her again. Not a single record existed. No ID, no address, not even the nanny agency could confirm her hiring. It was as if she had simply appeared when she was needed, and disappeared once her work was done. At first he thought it was a trick, a gap in the system. But as time went on, he stopped searching. He didn't need proof anymore. The proof was in his children. One afternoon, as the golden light of sunset spilled into the living room, Leela sat at the piano, playing the soft melody Amara used to hum. Ethan listened quietly from the couch, eyes closed, a faint smile crossing his face. Every note felt like sunlight on water, familiar, soothing, eternal. "Daddy," Lila said suddenly, pausing mid-note. "Do you think Miss Amara can still hear us?" Ethan opened his eyes. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Then he stood, walked over, and knelt beside her. "I think she's the reason you can play that song," he said softly. "I think she's been listening all along." Leo, sitting nearby with his sketchbook, added quietly, "Sometimes I see her in my dreams. She's always standing by Mommy." They both smile. Ethan's throat tightened, but he smiled. "Then maybe that's where she went. Somewhere she can watch over you both. With your mom." As he spoke, a gentle breeze drifted through the open window, brushing the curtains aside. The chimes sang again, soft, melodic, the same tune the twins were playing. Lila looked toward the sound and whispered, "She said she's proud of us." Ethan closed his eyes, tears glinting in the evening light. "I know," he whispered back. "I am too." The family sat there for a long while, father and children, letting the song fill the house. Outside, the sun slipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in gold and rose. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Ethan walked to the nursery one last time. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent Amara used to wear. He sat in the rocking chair, the soft creak echoing in the stillness. He looked at the empty spot by the window and said quietly, "Thank you for everything." For a brief, fleeting second, the chimes swayed, though there was no wind. A soft hum filled the room, barely audible, like the heartbeat of the house itself. And as Ethan closed his eyes, a peace washed over him. Deep, quiet, unshakable. The mansion that once stood as a monument to loneliness was now a home, not because of wealth or luxury or walls filled with art, but because love had finally returned to it. In the years that followed, Ethan would go on to build a foundation in Amara's name. The Amara Trust, dedicated to children with speech and mobility challenges. Every year, he told her story at the charity gala, about a woman who healed his family not with medicine, but with music, warmth, and faith. And though the guests often asked, "Who was she really?" Ethan only smiled and said, "Someone who reminded me that miracles don't always arrive in the light. Sometimes they walk into our lives quietly and leave music behind. Outside, the wind brushed past the chimes again, their soft notes ringing through the twilight air, as if somewhere, far beyond sight, Amara was still humming her lullaby, the same lullaby that once turned silence into song, despair into hope, and two lost children into a miracle.